Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Procrastinator's Pit Stop. Today, we do have another amazing guest for you, Shane Spraggs. For over 25 years, Shane has been driving successful projects for a variety of notable media and software startups and some of the world's largest brands, including Disney. Shane believes every team has the right to be happy, productive, and profitable. In 2023, Shane co authored the best selling book, The Power of Remote, an essential guide to modern team management. As a public speaker and productivity consultant, Shane helps organizations increase productivity and profitability by establishing habits grounded in proven remote best work practices. Shane, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Pleasure being here.
Oh, it's excellent having you here. Actually, this is a topic that I am near to dear to because I've been remote since before it was cool, 20 plus years and counting. But before we dive into that, let's do the little icebreaker that we like to have on the show. And your question today is, which cartoon character do you most resonate with and why?
Well, there's so many of them. I'm a big fan of cartoons, but I'm gonna see if I can pick one here. I maybe not resonate with completely, but I really enjoy Marvin the Martian. He is fanatical with his duties, his mission, and he deals with all these interruptions and works to get does his best job to do what he can to blow up the Earth, which maybe I'm not working to blow up the Earth, but at least I appreciate his ambition.
Yeah, that's a good choice too. Yeah, I like that one because Marvin embodies actually a lot of different aspects when you look at it, right? Because he's always looking for that one last piece. He's being thwarted by Bugs Bunny a lot, but he still keeps going. So yeah, you're right. He's very tenacious. All right. So before we dig even more into this topic, why don't you give us a little bit of a background and your journey and sort of how you came to be where you are today?
Yeah, sure. I actually got my start in software development way back in the late '90s. At the time, I got started with a myself and three partners at a web development company that we started back in the gold rush of web development and Internet 1.0. So I was a software developer. They were three designers, and we quickly learned that that was the wrong ratio for designers to software developers. But we got customers, so we had to hire people, and that quickly pushed me into a management role rather than a software developer role. I kept doing software development for quite a number of years, but I kind of stopped right around when JavaScript started becoming the approach to doing things. Um, but yeah, that led me into a whole area of project management, team leadership, how to get the most out of people, productivity, and uh, I've just been interested ever since. So as mentioned in the intro, I joined Disney after working at a web development company. I worked for a number of other startups since Disney, and for the last 4 years, I've worked with a company called Vertira out of Nova Scotia, and that was my first real foray into remote work. Uh, when I joined Vertira, Cynthia Watson, who was the owner, she was looking for someone like myself who could bring in some of the management and leadership skills that she had. She didn't necessarily feel she had strong skills of, and but she had been working like yourself remotely for her entire career, and she had compiled a list of things that she felt were important to making people successful remotely. I quickly learned what those were, applied some of the logic to management and leadership, and we put this book together. We started working in 2020, late 2020, but as things do go, it took a lot longer to get out than we thought it would, and it launched in 2023, February 2023, right around the time the return to the office movement started. So it wasn't the best timed book, but it was well received, and it actually hit bestseller status in Amazon for a couple of categories. And then in around September, October of last year, the return to the office movement kind of fizzled a bit, and now it's more of a hybrid movement. People are looking for flexibility. Understand the importance of letting people work from home, and the fact that they can be productive there. And since then it's picked up quite a bit.
Thanks for sharing that. It's quite an interesting path there. Now, just digging into the work at home aspect, I mean, there's so much to talk about there. Even around procrastination, productivity. So, just for people's frame of reference, what are some of the biggest challenges that you run into when someone wants to get things done and they're working from home.
Well, the thing people often forget is that you might be good at your job. Let's say you're a software developer. You might be good at your job, but that's one aspect to being successful in your career. There are lots of elements around being able to, you know, manage your time, be motivated, take a large task and break it down into its pieces so you can digest it one piece at a time. Asking for help, getting, communicating with others, bringing other people onto the journey with you. Um, and something as simple as not having the ability to fix your computer at home could be a real limitation. So it's all these additional skills and expertises you have to have to be a good remote worker that people sometimes overlook, and they can find themselves in a situation where they either feel siloed, they're not productive, they can't feel motivated, and it may not be the right thing for them. The other thing that's interesting to me is that we've found over the years that the people who are most successful remotely have a life outside of work. They have sports team they're part of, a hobby they're part of, a group of people. They socialize with others, and that's where they get their social fix. And so, effectively, remote work has allowed us to no longer, no, I mean, no longer, but we no longer have to get our social fix from the office. We can get it with people we want to hang out with outside the office.
Actually, that's something interesting that I never really I never really took it into consideration much. But getting that social kind of connection and fix from work, I mean, it's definitely something that's there, right? But it's not something that we really, well, something I never really put in a lot of stock into because it was, maybe 10 or 15% of your supposed need of social interaction, right? But I guess it's true that some people only had that. But do you think that, going into the remote work, I guess, environment now, that more people are tending to overwork rather than, stick to regular business hours?
I think that's more of a function of the company that hires them. I put that responsibility on the management team to take care of their employees. We had people working too many hours before the pandemic. We all know the Wolf of Wall Street approach. Work 60, 70 hours a week, maybe more. And I think it's unfair to characterize remote work as that being a problem for remote work. I know when I spent my time at Disney, it was quite common. I would work a 60-hour week, maybe 70 or 80-hour week, work late into the night many times, and that was at the office. I think it's a symptom of work in general that people feel that they can be productive or they can get more out of somebody based on how many hours they work, and that just isn't true. My belief is, and it's been backed up by lots of research, that people need time to relax, need time to rest in order to be creative between their work. They need time to focus on the work that they're doing. And you don't need to turn any further away than to look at the 4-day work week that has been successful all over the world in various large scale pilot tests where people are able to get their same amount of work done in 4 days than they used to have for 5 days. And that translates and before the 4 or 5 day work week, we had the 6-day work. It's just this more, we're starting to become more familiar with what makes people productive. And I really feel it's on the management and the leadership of the company to understand that and create the best environment for their staff.
Yeah, I know that makes a lot of sense too. The 4-day work week, and I know that there have been a lot of studies that back that up. One of the major things was is that at least some of the companies that I was talking to after, they were surprised that their workers actually got more work done in those 4 days than they did in their 5 days. So that was definitely interesting. So thanks for bringing that up. What would you say is the biggest challenge to overcome when working remotely, though? Whether is it technical, is it personal, or would it be like
For
company
the individual,
for the individual? Yeah.
I think it's motivation. If you're not working for someone, for a company that and doing work that keeps you motivated or keeps you engaged, it can be quite tough. I've been fortunate to have tasks and roles that engage me and making me want to do the work. I think at heart, most people want to contribute, want to produce value for the company. But if the company hasn't done a good enough job to clarify or explain to them how they're contributing to the long-term benefit of the company, then it can be very daunting to sit at home and either wait for work or try to be proactive. And that slowly builds into, a disengagement to the work you're doing, and looking at the clock and possibly even playing fast and loose on your hours. Rather than working 9 to 5, you're working, you know 9:30 to 4, maybe taking a long lunch, and that does happen. Unfortunately, those stories are probably fewer than those stories of people doing well, but they're the ones that get published in the newspapers, or newspapers these days, but online. That people tend to gravitate towards the bad news stories as opposed to the success stories. Even just this week, we saw that Amazon is now returning their staff to the office 5 days a week, despite evidence to the contrary. So it's still happening out there, and so in short, yeah, for a remote worker, it comes down to, can you feel good about the work you're doing, and are you motivated to do it?
And that's an interesting question, and it comes up. It breaches into this next topic I was thinking about, was the fact that you are in a remote environment. So you've got this propensity to either undermanage or micromanage. So what are some of the strategies that you put in place to ensure that the atmosphere is one where one is comfortable working, while at the same time there have to be checks and balances, right? I mean, we can't
Yeah,
just.
yeah, and absolutely. And I always start with saying, we had bad managers before the pandemic, right? We had this. It was well known that we took really good individual contributors and turned them into bad managers. And the reason for this is simple: that management is not a extension of the skill you had before. It's a new skill on its own that you have to learn, and it requires talking with people, managing your own time, managing other people's time. And it can be hard for some people, and what we've done is we've taken bad managers and told them they can't see their team or touch, people around them. They have to do it from their office, in their house, and that just makes for even worse managers. Simply put, there's several clear things you have to do. You have to tie the work back to either the mission of the company, and this should be easy if the company's done a good job outlining, the goals or the priorities for the year, the projects that are going to work on those priorities, um, and the tasks of those projects, or the work has to contribute to some sort of meaningful value for the customer. You're in sales, you're in production, you're in customer service, right? And you have your own metrics there. Okay, we have to answer calls by this certain amount of time. We have to help a certain number of customers, so on and so forth. So you have to tie the work back to some, how this is contributing value. Nothing's more demotivating for an employee to have them work on something for 6 or 7 months, and then for that to go nowhere, or for it to find out it was not what people wanted to do, what people didn't think was the right approach in the first place. And so from there, a manager has to meet with the team, the team members once a week at least. I'm a big proponent on having really solid one-on-ones with your team members and I recommend people do it once a week. I know there's lots of discussion out there about whether that should be less time or more time, but it really is your chance to sit down with the employee and find out how they're doing. And it's not just to see what work they've done, but it's a mental health check-in as well. I can tell by looking at someone on the screen, or certainly if they don't go on camera, that maybe something might be up. We can take other steps to deal with it. And it's important to have that connection. I also have I've evolved my approach for one-on-ones. I won't get into that too much unless you want to, but there's a better way of doing them for remote work. The other thing is to create psychological safety within your team. So this is simply um, creating an environment where people feel it's safe to fail. And we all know growth comes from failure, innovation comes from failure, and people need to try things out and feel comfortable that they might not be successful in it in order to find the thing that actually does get successful. And one of the key ways of doing that is for the manager to show some be humble themselves. So if I'm doing something and I do the wrong thing, for me to admit that to my team, which is surprisingly very difficult for a lot of people. And along with that is some emotional intelligence, having a sense of how that person's feeling when they're in that situation. So there's lots more I could go on if you like, but those are the top points.
No, those are some very good points, and I wonder what is your view on remote working sort of monitoring. I mean, you've got applications that go from taking a snapshot every 10 minutes to applications that are like Time Doctor is notorious for tracking every second of every application of every window. Do you see a difference in productivity of those teams that use a tool that is super precise, like Doctor, as opposed to teams that don't use any tools at all, rather than just sort of standard check-ins?
Yeah, and quite simply, what gets measured gets done. So if you're going to measure keystrokes, people are going to focus on keystrokes, not the work that they've been given. And you're at best going to bring them down to a subpar level if you put a lot of uh, monitoring on them. What you want is you want to think about how people are successful and how you are successful. As an individual, do you work 8 hours straight and are you on that whole time? The answer is no. And you would not expect this from somebody at the office either. We up until the mid 90s, smoke breaks were quite common. And now you can probably argue that social media breaks, but, you know, people don't work straight through the 8 hour day. It's just not feasible. You might get 4 or 5 good hours out of somebody at the office. And in reality, it's actually you get 5 or 6 good hours out of somebody at home. Furthermore, by giving them the flexibility to work when they're available to work, they might decide to work early morning or late in the evening to allow them to pick up their kids at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when school's out. And that helps them in another way, which is allows them to feel more comfortable with the work they're doing and not rushed and not anxious or have a sense of being watched nonstop. So bottom line, it's a bad idea. If you're monitoring your staff, you're measuring the wrong things, and you're creating an environment where people don't feel comfortable to succeed and take risks.
Well, I guess that kind of goes into the territory of like malicious compliance, right? Wherein I remember working for a couple of companies and with a couple of companies where they made you document everything you did manually. So I bet you a good 30 minutes of the day was spent just writing out what you did for the day. So I can certainly see where you lose a lot of time doing that. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've seen in companies where they want to go remote?
It's a cultural issue, really. There's a bunch of minor shifts that need to happen that can be difficult at scale. And I understand and appreciate why large companies, such as Amazon, have decided that after so many years working remotely, they've decided it's just not worth the investment to us. We'll lose a few people on the way, but we'll go back to being in the office how we and restart our culture and where we know we are successful. The the challenge for a company is that um, when you work remotely, when people work, you have to have a certain level of trust, and that trust is born out of how you track the work. So we talked earlier about keyboard trackers. What you should be doing is you should be tracking the tasks and action items of the staff. So if I've got work to do, you might give me point A and point B, but let me discover the journey and hold me accountable to that. So if I've got a task to do, you ask me how long it's going to take and when I think we'll get it done, and if it's going to compete with my other priorities. There's just some basic questions that a good manager will ask, and this happens again in the office, but without that, you end up dictating what work gets done, and it can get in the way of adoption. The other thing is you do have challenges with if you take your current staff, not all of them want to work remotely. So you have people who are going to be upset by the fact that they can no longer come into the office and talk to people, and it's not surprising to me we have so many companies going hybrid because it's sort of a middle ground. Hey, you get to go home and work from the house 3 days a week, but 2 days a week you have to be in the office and see your colleagues. It doesn't necessarily always work out as the way people think it should, but at least it gives people what they're looking for. I'm a big believer that we're going to see more remote work as time goes on, and culture will grow from the start of a business. But yeah, generally when it comes to moving from an in office to remote in an existing company, it's a massive change management challenge, and you have to do the typical, what's the current state, what's the future state, how are we going to get there, and is everyone on board, and to be prepared to maybe lose those individuals who aren't on board, even if they say they are, right?
Yeah, that actually raises an interesting question. So the question that I have is, in your experience, just going back to that task based measurement. So in remote work, and I know there are different studies on this, but I want to hear your opinion, your experience. Has it been more effective to have remote workers on an hourly wage, a salary wage, or a per project wage?
Yeah, and it's going to be different depending on the individual, but I'm a big proponent on salary. Take the hourly guessing out of it. Uh, just like we talked about earlier with the people finding a way to cheat the system. We all know that if you have a contractor who's not happy with with the relationship, they will pad their hours. Instead of this saying they build 5 hours, they maybe build 6 hours. That gives them an easy 20% increase in their rate for the day. It's very common for people to exaggerate how many hours they earned, because at the end of the day, the payoff is money. And people do surprising things to get money. You take that out of the equation, and you make it, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Money is like middle of the road, and it actually only becomes a detractor if there's not enough of it. People want to have, ultimately self-actualization, where they feel that the work they're doing contributes to a higher purpose, and that they are, they're doing good in the world. And hopefully you have a company that allows them to achieve that. But yeah, in my opinion, I think that anything outside of outside of a salary job is going to create the opportunity for people to maybe manipulate it a little bit, and certain individuals will, certain individuals won't, but a salary keeps it fair, and removes that as a motivator.
And are there any other ways that you work with clients, maybe how to transition to a remote workplace and how to keep that motivation aside from money or letting them know their work has purpose?
I'll go back to one of the conversations we had earlier with regard to social. A lot of companies don't promote their internal mission statement as the cornerstone of their culture. A lot of companies' culture is socially based, and that is, if you talk to anyone about culture, they usually think, okay, well, we have, on Fridays you can wear jeans. We have birthday parties once a month. We have, summer events where one can come, and it's all talks about the social aspects of the business. When you go remote, that's sort of put aside, and you now have to focus more on the mission statement and the purpose of the business. So the first thing to do is to make sure that you are hammering home and reminding people of why the company's in business and the values of the business. A good company value will not just provide you with a list of keywords for a job application. It will give you tools you can use to make decisions. So a good example is, you often hear the value is, um, confidence. Okay, we're gonna have confidence in our work. Well, you know what? If you're hiring someone who doesn't have confidence, that's a different problem, right? That everyone should have confidence in the work they're doing, um, or innovation, or they have these words that kind of seem like their values, but no, if you don't have people who live by them, you probably don't have good workers. So at Vertira, we have a great one. It's say no to fire drills, and this value allows us to make decisions and call people out, because the fire drill, at least in our mind, is an urgent, non-essential task. And anybody in the company is allowed to say, hey, we're not doing that right now. Say no to fire drills. And it's amazingly effective, because people can snap out of their urgency and they'll get back to work on something that's more important and save that for later. So yeah, focusing on, first and foremost, you have to put more focus on the purpose and values of the company, and you hope at that point to start to attract people who feel akin to that purpose and values, right? Let's say you are a company that is helping with green energy. Well, you want to attract people to your business who not just want a job, but want a job in the green energy space. The next thing is to ensure that you have a bit of social activity and you can build some rapport. I'm a big believer in a thing called relatedness. So this comes from two gentlemen out of the 80s, Richard Ryan and Edward Deci. They came up with the self-determination theory. Now, the self-determination theory outlines how people are motivated for work. Prior to the 80s, people felt that motivation was extrinsic. In other words, it applied to you. So I would either um, punish you or pay you or be someone. I might be someone in power and tell you to do something, and that's how you were motivated to do something. It was applied to you. They suggested that motivation was actually intrinsic, and there's three drivers to that: autonomy, um, competency, and relatedness. And what relatedness is a relationship that's a step down from friendship. Okay, you're not entirely friends with people, but you appreciate them, you recognize the value they bring, and you feel some connection with them because of their either you've gone through a project with them, or they have similar values, and so on and so forth. And if you think about most of the relationships you might have at work, a lot of them at the relatedness level and not the friendship level. In fact, in your office, you have this risk of going the other direction and having people not like each other, which can cause other problems. Anyways, I'm digressing. So you can build relatedness in two key ways. One is to have well-organized, facilitated online events, and these you have to be careful with these. You can't do happy hour on a virtual happy hour. People just don't connect that way. You have to have someone facilitate or a computer facilitate the event. The next is to do icebreakers. We did one at the start of this podcast. An icebreaker, fun way to start the meeting, injects a little bit of social and humor into the day, and you learn a little bit about people when it happens. And we went through a process at Berkshire. We went through a whole pile of different icebreakers and came up with a couple of really good ones. And something as simple as saying, what's your favorite smell from your childhood, gives people talking, breaks them out of the work mode. They learn a little bit about each other, and they feel a little bit more connected. And so that's there's a ton more things I could share, but those are the key things. You want to still focus on social from a relatedness level. You also want to make sure you focus on your values and vision of the company.
Well, I mean, human beings are social animals, right? So we need to be social. And I know that, well, at least when we were in school, I know that they used to separate us from our friends because we talk and not get anything done. As adults, I guess there's somewhat a risk that we can do that. But do you see any sort of a downside or any big challenge to companies getting people to interact because they are remote?
I actually think it's generational. We have, depending on who you talk to right now, a lot of the most common person to work remotely is actually older. They've gone through their time at the office. They've learned how to be at the office, and now they're kind of just want to get their work done, right? They're done with all the socializing stuff. And the older you get, the more likely you want to work remotely, and more likely you'll be successful remotely. For someone straight out of college or university, right now it's recommended you spend the first 5 years in an office to learn those critical skills that may not be in your face, in something as simple as arriving to work on time or letting people know you're sick and that sort of thing that can be obvious to people who've been working for years, but less so for someone who's just getting into the workplace. However, I'm interested in this generation that's coming up because in the last since 2008, there's been iPhones. Kids are growing up nowadays more connected than ever. There was a study recently that showed that, and this is a great line, brains that fire together wire together, and it doesn't matter whether you're firing together in person or online. When you're firing together, they form relationships, and you just have to look no further than Call of Duty and the friendships that are formed across the country for people who play online games. And they have tribes in World of Warcraft that could never meet each other, and we see heartwarming stories all the time on social media sites of friends that get together after 8 years and never have playing the same game together. they are friends. They've formed relationships. So I think as a society, we are going to see that there's going to be a different type of relationship forming, and people are going to be more comfortable with the idea of tuning into a computer as opposed to going out to an office.
Well, it is interesting that you bring that up too, because I know that everybody's stuck to their cell phones now, but there's something to be said for I guess that culture of just going into an office, sitting around a table, and actually seeing each other. But now that we have Zoom or we have any of these other platforms, you don't think it's necessarily important for people to sit in the same room anymore?
Well, I think there's some value in it. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely useful for you to get people together on maybe a periodic basis. If I like to think of a new company starting up these days. First of all, they would probably not, decide to invest in an office place. I don't know who would, start a business and say, okay, let's put $6,000 a month into an office, just so we can work from home again or work remotely from the office. Um, but that that money should be earmarked for something other than the office, and that should be, you know, you want to put some money aside and budget for getting your team together in person more frequently. And obviously, as you get larger and larger and larger, it becomes fairly cost prohibitive. But maybe you might, do pockets of people in the various regional areas. And there's value in that. I like to say that people need to see how tall each other are, right? And that you can build a relationship much quicker when you are in person. And I still prefer to brainstorm over a whiteboard versus Miro. I just think there's more to it. It just feels more tactile and you can see things better. But Miro does a decent job in a pinch for all the less important things you might do. Maybe you get together for a yearly retreat and hammer out a strategy for your business. The other thing is um, that people there's some value in people getting time one-on-one with each other. So if you have you can set aside a budget for a coffee budget. There's a couple of companies I'm familiar with that they say no matter where you are, if you travel to another city and somebody who works with you or in our company is in that city, here's free money for you to go have a coffee. There's no strings attached. You just have to go and meet them. And that's these little things you can do, but you don't have to be in person 24/7. There's I think hybrid work's going to give some mix of that, but even then you'll hear people who go weeks without really properly talking to people and making the most use of of the um, the time together.
Okay, well, that's a very good insight. We're actually coming up on some time here, so just a quick question, Shane. Do you feel that maybe there is something I didn't ask that I should have asked, or maybe something that we should have covered that we didn't cover?
I don't, there's so much to it. I mean, it really, I'm a big proponent on looking at it from the standpoint that if you set up a well-running remote work, office or business, those same tactics are the same ones you need to be successful in person. And one of the key ones for me is intentionality. You have to rid yourself of organic. We're all familiar with the water cooler and the concept of we have to get together and we're gonna have these organic interactions at the water cooler that are going to drive innovation. If you're leaving the water cooler to drive innovation for your company, you're literally leaving that to luck. So as business owners or leaders in your business, ask yourself, does innovation happen here? And create a plan to intentionally organize innovation at your business. And there's lots of different ways of doing that. But the same thing works if you're working in person, right? If you have an office, well, how are we going to drive innovation? Well, maybe we have a skunk works and, this team over here maybe we're going to give people this certain information so they can stay on top of things and think about the alternatives, right? So yeah, think intentionally, not organically, and you have to have a plan for everything that your remote business is doing.
All right. Well, thank you for that last insight there. And just before we do go, what is the best way for our listeners to go? Either pick up your book or get in touch with
Well, the book is available on Amazon. Just search for Power Remote. It was published by Forbes. If you can probably find it there as well. And if you want to find me on LinkedIn, by all means, connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is unique. I'm a lucky guy. No other Shane Spraggs is out there, so just search for my name and you'll find me and connect, please.
All right. Well, you heard him. So we're going to go out there and we're going to connect and we're going to pick his brain about all the best remote work practices because, I mean, let's face it, it is where we're heading eventually. So we should probably get a jump on that. Well, again, thank you so much for joining the show today, Shane. And to all our listeners, thanks for tuning in. And just remember, if you can't find inspiration and motivation for yourself today, maybe just be that inspiration and motivation for someone else. And we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Chris.